Alright, I'm back and trying a live stream, which I've never done before. So, again, this is in Vintage Amusement Plaza with retrogame.cyberfreak.com. I realized in my first test video I didn't say who I was. I'm Dave, and this is going through the OBS, Open Broadcasting System, which is open source, running on my new computer over there. Adjusted the gains on the microphone, and hopefully it'll make the audio a lot clearer. I can see from the volume monitor, should be a lot louder now. So tomorrow should have the very last of the stuff coming from my mother-in-law's estate. She passed away 4 weeks ago, and been slowly bringing everything home. And today, later today, it'll be a desk and a couple other pieces of furniture, but that should be it. In the wall behind me, there's about 1,000 pieces of clothing we're trying to get rid of piece by piece because my wife can't fit in it, and the style is, a lot of the clothing is over a decade old, so the style is a little bit out of date, but it was good clothing to begin with. So yeah, just seeing how a live stream works. Looks like my computer is handling it pretty well. It's only showing about a whopping 10% CPU usage, so it should be alright. I have to say, I was debating, it was about 5 or 6 years since I actually got a new computer, and I was waiting for AMD to come out with something new. And last year they came out with the Ryzen series, and I was looking at all the different processors. I was like, do I go cheaper with the Ryzen 3, or a little better with the Ryzen 5, or just go heck with it? I need a computer that's good for at least another 5 years. So I went with the Ryzen 7. I wanted the Ryzen 7 1700, and because I just need something I want something with a lot of threads to it that'll just be able to handle whatever I throw at it, productivity wise. And it's performing pretty darn well, I have to say. I'm not disappointed at all. Not to get too tech nerdy, I did go with a X3 370 motherboard, which is the better motherboard, and I went with DDR4 3000 because the processor is also running at 3 gigahertz. I don't have it overclocked. Don't really need anything extra that. I was able to move my old video card over from my last machine because that was actually a pretty decent NVIDIA card. So I'm running that. But if you ever, what really impressed me about the Ryzen 7 was the fact it does have 8 physical cores and 16 logical cores, and on the system, like I run Ubuntu 16.04, and for symmetrical multiprocessing, it's a great processor for an OS that really understands multiple processors. And Linux kernel, it's running 4.4, I think, really deals with all those multiple cores very well, so balances the load very well. For some reason it prefers processor 10 and 11, which I don't quite get, but whatever. But it does move around from time to time which processor it's hitting. It's a decent machine, and it wasn't cheap though. I reused the parts and reused a hard drive, a case, and the video card, and it was still close to $900 just for those parts. So I went with more expensive parts than I usually go with. A lot of times I try to go budget, and this is the first time I went you know, I want something that really will last me a while. I'm glad I did. There's a lot of, I mean, there's something to be said about budget systems, and for 98% of users, I would say any system you buy will do whatever you want. But you've got that 2 to 3% of users, and those are of course gamers who like doing PC gaming, which I'm not one of them. So I want something with more productivity in video editing and coding based than um, gaming per se. I mean, I have a decent video card. I don't even know what number it is, but um, I wanted something which just gives me that raw horsepower like I needed, because um, all the DVDs I own, yeah, going back a ways here, all the DVDs I have, I've converted over to uh, MP4 format so I can stream them on Plex. So I don't have to haul out the DVDs to play it. And I was like, okay, my old machine I was getting, when you rip a disc, it was 110, 115 frames a second. It took a good 45 minutes to encode a feature length film. New machine, it encodes at almost 1300 frames per second to MP4, which is insane. And the video I uploaded yesterday, that was a 1080 video, and a good 20 minutes long. It took it 4 minutes to render it, to export it, and it was like, it's just insanely fast. So um, if you have the money and don't mind building this machine yourself, uh, it's worth the investment, I think. Um, Again, it all gets down to is like, what are you doing with your machine, with your system? I mean, if you're doing game, I mean, a typical gamer probably would never need a 7 series. I mean, be it a AMD Ryzen 7 or i7 processor for gaming. You just need a really decent video card. However, if you're looking for something with a lot of just raw horsepower to to get work done, I really recommend it. So I'm just kind of, oh look, Tapper. Yeah, so I'm just down here relaxing a little bit before going off the bed, and I wanted to see how easy or difficult it is to do live streams. And I'm not having much luck with my emulator tonight. I have to say, I see why I do understand why the heavily edited video content is becoming more rare, because it's a lot of work. And doing live streaming like this is much easier. This is a classic game called Tapper. It's very simple, actually. I used to play this in Indiana Beach, in beautiful Monticello, Indiana. Indiana Beach is like this great throwback. Well, it was this great throwback to the. It was like a carnival that never ended. Actually, I think a lot of the rides there were just carnival rides that they. Get up there. No. Hard game, actually, Tapper. Indiana Beach, we would go there every summer, and they had these great arcades with dozens of machines, and some really old. I mean, even for at the time, quite old machines, arcade machines. There was one that was like a fire truck where you had 2 players. There was a person behind you with the steering wheel, the guy in the front with the steering wheel, and you would have to navigate around, which was pretty darn funny, actually. Um, other than that, uh, that was Indiana Beach was interesting because you had this whole amusement park, and then there was this Lake Schaefer, which is a man-made lake. Um, and they had this thing, I think it's called the Schaefer Queen. I'm sure it still runs there if the park's still open. That runs around the lake. But they had you had the overhead like ski lift runs over the whole thing. I didn't really like that because I'm terribly afraid of heights. I always have been for some reason. And then there was like two or three arcades. There was one at one end of the park, another one at the other end of the park, and there's some good games there. I remember playing the old Asteroids, the original Asteroids game. It's actually a pretty hard game if you've never played Asteroids, the original Asteroids, because that was vector graphics. Though I have to say, of all the arcades, the one I probably went to the most would have been Chicago Ridge Mall. Chicago Ridge is in the southern suburb of Chicago, southwest suburb. It's one of the close-in suburbs. And they had an Aladdin's Castle right by the eatery, the food court there, which was funny. The font they used made it look like the Fattery. So for years when I was a kid, I thought it was the Fattery, not the eatery. And then you have R-Type's a hard game, man. I feel like playing something different. So yeah, for years I thought it was the Fattery instead of the eatery. But they had an Aladdin's Castle, which was like right next door to the Radio Shack. So it's like classic 80s mall. So that was a good one. And then down in Matson, Illinois, there was this Lincoln Mall, which is tore down about a year ago. It had this gigantic arcade. Oh my goodness! It had to have at least 300 systems there. It was massive. That was a great arcade. I remember playing Stun Runner and Paperboy, and a lot of classic games like that. Xenophobe. There was a lot of really great classic games they had in that arcade. It was a huge arcade. It was so sad when that arcade closed because that mall was having troubles even back in the 90s and late 80s. And probably the best arcade, really great arcades down in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. That's Fanny Farkle's, right on the main strip there. I remember, I don't even think how many quarters I dumped in that arcade. And then every summer we would stay in a place called Cuddy's Campground. I think there's still a few Cuddy's left, but there was a Cuddy's that was in LaPorte, Indiana. For those not familiar, LaPorte is just it's a county in the center north of Indiana, and it's about 60 miles away from Chicago. We would go there in the summer, and they had like a very small arcade. They had a Mr. Do, if I remember correctly. I think they did have Pac-Man. I forget which one. I can't remember the other game. I'll have to ask Mike what other games they had there. Spent a lot of quarters there, and that was a small arcade. But down Gatlinburg, Fanny Farkle's, I know it's still there, so whoever goes down to Gatlinburg, I would highly recommend it. It's in Gatlinburg. It's right in the main strip. And so that's a classic one to go to. It's a shame. I used to work in LaGrange, another suburb of Chicago, and there's a arcade called the Galloping Ghost, and it's still there, and it's supposed to be an awesome arcade. I just have not had a chance to go there, and I need to do that one of these days, maybe for like a birthday or something, just to go and just play. So that's one of my goals. I think maybe this year, after this madness of getting rid of stuff is over, is go to the Galloping Ghost. I know people come from all over. It's such a shame because I live in right outside of Chicago. It's like half an hour to get there. It's nothing. I don't even think it's that. It's about 25 minutes to get to LaGrange from here. So I need to go there one of these days and actually try Galloping Ghost. Though honestly, I've gotten with my emulation setup here, it's hard for me to actually justify going down to an actual arcade, because it's like I can just come down here, fire up my system, and play games forever. This is a RoboCop. Oh, it's the Japanese version. That makes it even more challenging. I'm sure it's not radically different. Yeah, that's getting back to Indiana. We had a Atari 2600 hooked up. Played a lot of Atari 2600 back in the day. It was played Reactor, Pitfall 2. I beat Pitfall 2 once, and if you've never played Pitfall, it is a Pitfall 2 on the 2600. It's a very challenging game, but I actually beat it once, just once. That was enough. That's a hard game. Yeah, RoboCop. It's a good classic 80s arcade game. But yeah, lots of different arcades I've been to. Also in LaPorte, there used to be a Holiday Inn Holodome, and that one had an arcade, of course, and that one had the sit-down version of Star Trek the movie, Star Trek the motion picture game. They had that system. They had actually a really decent arcade there. They had a pinball machine where if you hit it just right, it would give you a free game. Let me think. Of all the arcades as a kid, probably it had to be Aladdin's Castle, because that was the one that was the most convenient. Because the closest mall to us didn't actually have an arcade, Evergreen Plaza, and that one they just tore down. They just completely redid Evergreen Plaza just this last year. Ironically, returned back to its original form, which was an outdoor mall, and they enclosed it, and they basically knocked the entire thing down, and now it's a nice modern outdoor mall, for better or for worse. I've actually been quite surprised how much retail's changed in just the last 7 or 8 years. How many stores have come and gone. I mean, you have everything from Radio Shack, Toys R Us, and Sears almost gone, and Carson Perry Scott is closing up. Bonton, I guess, is the mother store. It's just how much retail's changed has actually been quite amazing. I mean, I understand why. I mean, it's people are going more for experiences. I mean, people want to blame Amazon, but the tastes are changing. People are trying to spend more money on experiences, which is, I think, pretty evident, because you have a situation where restaurants are doing extremely well. Well, what are restaurants? They're an experience. You don't have to store what you have from a restaurant once you're done. I mean, when you go to a store, you got to buy it, you got to maintain it through its entire life, and then when you have to dispose of it when it's done. So that actually could take quite a bit of work. I know for myself, I mean, I enjoy tinkering and doing repair work much more than I like actually acquiring new things. Ooh, Return of the Jedi. This definitely looks like a Lucasfilm game. Where am I? I'm dead. So yeah, this is not the most exciting live stream. Sorry. What do I want to play? Rastan? Not Rastan Saga. That's a terrible game. So yeah, what other arcades were out there? Whenever we went on vacation, we'd always seek out whatever arcade was at the hotels. We stayed at a lot of Holiday Inns, and they were actually pretty good about having arcades back in the day. Of course, in case any of you kids are wondering why arcades are so popular, is back when, back in ye olden days, the home consoles just did not have the computing power of the arcade machines. This is the arcade version. So it was actually a treat to go to the arcade because you could play games that looked better and played better than what you could play at home because the tech just wasn't there. Because you take any modern console, PS4 or Switch or anything like that, and I mean, 10 years ago those were supercomputers. I mean, just the raw computing horsepower that they have is insane, and you could never get better than, I mean, compared to these systems. This is probably a Z80 based processor by the look of the color palette. Yeah, got it. Can you tell I played this game in the arcade a bit? Actually, my favorite version of this game is over on the Sega Master System. That's a great system too. That's also Z80, but not clocked as fast as the arcade systems would be. But that's why the Master System had pretty good conversions compared to some other systems at the time, because the arcade systems used the Z80 as well. Let's see. So you have long pauses. I feel like I'm Mark here. Yeah, so what are great? I mean, I remember one of the neatest. One neat experience I remember as a kid is when I first saw the. You would go to Babbage's in the mall. Which I didn't know Babbage's actually is still around. That's GameStop, it's the same company. You would go to the mall, the Babbage's or Electronics Boutique, and you'd see the latest and greatest systems. I remember seeing a Neo Geo for the first time. Oh my goodness, that was an expensive system. Oh wow. I mean, it was insane. I mean, it was like something like $600 or so, which is just crazy for I mean, this is $600 with $200 games in I'm out of practice here. With $200 games back in the 80s. That's just, I mean, equivalent now. That's like a $2,000 system with $400 or $500 games. And it's like no one I knew ever owned one of those. And of course, what was the other one? The 3DO. I remember when those came out. Almost every major retailer I remember actually had the 3DO. The Sears did, Montgomery Ward did with their Electric Avenue. So they all had it. remember, what was it? The really random today. Seeing my first Pentium system in a in Sears. I think it was a Pentium 66. Yeah, it was in the Sears in Chicago Ridge. That was neat seeing the first time. Actually, it's quite amazing how long that Pentium name's been around. It has been around since, I think about, oh, it had to be like 92, 91? It's been around an insane long time. Tell you what, it's getting late. If anyone sees this, thanks for watching. This is Dave with RetroGame.cyberfreak.com. It's Freak with a PH, and this has been Vintage Amusement Plaza. And hopefully I'll be able to stream again tomorrow night if my desk is back in order. And thank you everyone for watching. Bye-bye.